22. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Let's recite the verse. You can repeat after me. Yattu Krishna vadekasmin
Yattu Krishna Vedekasmin
karye saktam ahetukam
कार्ये
Karye
सक्तम
Saktam
अहेतुकम्
atatvarthavadalpam cha
अतत्वार्तवत् अल्पं च
tat tamasam udaharitam.
Tat
तत्तामसम्
Tamasam
उदाहृतम्
Udharitam
Yattu Krishna vedekasmin
Yattu
यत्तु
Krishna
कृष्णावद्
Vedekasmin
एकस्मिन्
karye saktam ahetukam
Karye
सक्तम्
Saktam
अहेतुकम्
Ahetukam
atatvarthavadalpam cha
अतत्वर्थ अल्पं च
Atatvartam
tat tamasam udaharitam.
Tat
तत्तामसम्
Tamasam
उदाहृतम्
Udharitam
Yattu Krishna vadekasmin
Yattu Krishna Vedekasmin
karye saktam ahetukam
Karye Saktam Ahetukam
atatvarthavadalpam cha
Atartvam
tat tamasam udaharitam.
Tat Tamasam
तामसम्
Udharitam
उदाहृतम्
Anyone else would like to recite?
Yattu Krishna vad ekasmin
Yattu
Yattu Krishna
यत्तु
vadekasmin
एकस्मिन्
karye saktam ahaitukam
karye
Karye
saktam
Saktam
ahetukam
Ahetukam
atta varta vad alpam cha
atatvarthavadalpam cha
atas tamasam udartam
tat tamasam
Tamasam
udaharitam.
Udartam
Yattu Krishna vadekasmin
Yattu Krishna vadekasmin
Vedekasmin
Karye Sahajam Haitukam
karye
Karye
saktam
Saktam
ahetukam
Ahetukam
Attathat Badal Pancha
atatvarthavadalpam cha
Atarvartavad Cha
Tattamasam Udharitam
tat tamasam
Tamasam
udaharitam.
Udharitam Yat
Anyone else?
Krishnavad Ekasmin
Yattu Krishna vadekasmin
Karye Shaktam Ahetukam
karye saktam ahetukam
Adardhavatavat Alpam Cha
atatvarthavadalpam cha
Pancha
Tamasam Udhartitam
tat tamasam udaharitam.
यत्तु कृष्णावद् एकस्मिन्
Yattu Krishna vadekasmin
कार्यासक्तम् अहैतुकम्
karye saktam ahetukam
Ahetukam
अतात्वार्तावद् अल्पं च
atatvarthavadalpam cha
तत्तामसम् उदार्तम्
tat tamasam
Tamasam
udaharitam.
Udhartam
Prabhujis would like to recite? Okay. So let's recite the synonyms. Yat,
Yat
Yat
that which.
that
that
which
which
Tu,
to
to
but.
but
but
Krishnavat,
Krishnavat
Krishnavat
as all in all.
as all in all
Ekasmin,
Ekasmin
in one.
in
in
one
one
Karye,
Karye
Karye
work.
work
work
Saktam,
Saktam
Satyam
attached.
attached
Ahitukam,
Ahetukam
without cause.
without cause
Atatvarthavat,
Atatvartavat
without knowledge of reality.
without
without
knowledge of reality
Alpam,
Alpam
very meager.
very
meager
meager
Cha,
Cha
Cha
and.
and
and
Tat,
Tat
Tat
that
that
tamasam,
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 in the mode of darkness,
in the
the
mode
mode
of
of
darkness,
udaharitam,
Udarita
Udaritam
is said to be.
is
is
said
said
to
to
be.
be.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as the all in all, without knowledge of the truth, and which is very meager, is said to be in the mode of darkness. Excuse me. Purport. The knowledge of the common man is always in the mode of darkness or ignorance, because every living entity in conditional life is born into the mode of ignorance. One who does not develop knowledge through the authorities or scriptural injunctions has knowledge that is limited to the body. He is not concerned about acting in terms of the directions of scripture. For him, God is money, and knowledge means the satisfaction of bodily demands. Such knowledge has no connection with the absolute truth. It is more or less like the knowledge of the ordinary animals, the knowledge of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. Such knowledge is described here as the product of the mode of darkness. In other words, knowledge concerning the spirit soul beyond this body is called knowledge in the mode of goodness. Knowledge producing many theories and doctrines by dint of mundane logic and mental speculation is the product of the mode of passion. And knowledge concerned only with keeping the body comfortable is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisheshi Shunyavadi Paschat Deshatarine. I read the translation one more time. And that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as the all in all, without knowledge of the truth, and which is very meager, is said to be in the mode of darkness. So here, before we discuss this verse, I just give a little context about what's happening over here. So we see that Krishna is again talking about the three modes, how different things are in different under the different modes. Now, this theme has come earlier in the Bhagavad Gita. So if you remember, very emphatically it comes in the 14th chapter. Then it again comes in the 17th chapter. And now Krishna is again talking about the same thing here in the 18th chapter. So what's the difference here? So 14th chapter basically gave a little introduction of the three modes. You know, what are the three modes and what are their general characteristics. So that is more like an introduction that Krishna had given there in the 14th chapter. In the 17th chapter, Krishna basically talked about four things in the different modes. He talked about ahar. Ahar means food in the three modes. Then he talked about yagya. Yagya is sacrifice. Then dana is charity. And tapa is austerities. So he had talked about these four things primarily, how they are under three modes, how different sacrifices can be classified in the three modes, how different kinds of food items can be classified in the three modes. Like that he had talked about in the 17th chapter. Now here he had taken the discussion a little more deeper. You know, he is talking about how every action itself and the constituents of every action, they are in the three modes. So for example, how our knowledge itself is in the three modes, you know, how our dhriti is our determination itself is in the three modes. So every different constituent of every action that he is talking about here in the 18th chapter. So now these verses that we are discussing, it basically grows from verse 18.18 and 18.19. So just to remind everyone what those verses were, Krishna had mentioned in the 18.18 verse, Jnanam Gyayam Parigyata Trividha Karma Chodana Karanam Karma Karteti Trividha Karma Sangraha. So Jnanam Gyayam Parigyata. So knowledge, Jnanam is knowledge, Gyayam is the objective of knowledge, and Parigyata is the knower, the soul itself. So Jnanam is very important for us. To do any activity, we need knowledge. You know, when Lord Brahma, when he first came out of the lotus flower which came from the navel of Lord Vishnu, he had no idea what to do. So he was like a little confused, and then he went inside the the flower again and went inside the stem, and then he traveled there for several years, but he couldn't reach the end. Then he again came out, and then he performed sacrifices, and then the knowledge was revealed to Lord Brahma, and then he started acting. So actually, when he was first born, he had no idea what to do. So Jnanam is very, very important. Unless we have the knowledge, what is the right action? What is the action itself? What action are we supposed to do? Forget about right or wrong action. Even to do wrong action, there is some knowledge that is needed. Gyayam. So here, basically, what's happening is Krishna is talking more in terms of the Gyan of a Karma Yogi, or we can say Karma Yoga is leading towards Jnana and finally towards Bhakti. So the Gyan of a Jnani or a Jnana of a Karma Yogi. So what is the Gyan of a Karma Yogi? Basically, Jnana is that what is the Gyan that he is aspiring for? So that Gyan is I am not the body, I am the soul. That understanding that I am not this body, I am a soul, I am different from my body. Gyayam is the objective of knowledge. So what is the objective of knowledge for a Karma Yogi? The objective is the realization of the knowledge. It is one thing to know that I am not the body, I am the soul. I mean, I know that I am not the body, I am the soul, but when I act when, as if I am the body, I am not the soul, So Gyayam is basically that realization has to come. So that is the objective of that knowledge. And Parigyata is the soul himself. Karta and Parigyata are the same thing here. And Krishna is saying Trividha Karma Chodana. Karma Chodana is the motivation for the action. Now, what is the motivation? So what exactly is the motivation of Jnana Yogi? Krishna had actually talked about this in the 5th chapter, if you remember. This was verse 11 that Krishna had spoken. Kayena manasa buddhya kevaler indriyarapi yoginaha karma kurvanti sangam tyaktva atma shuddhaye. So yoginaha karma kurvanti. A yogi acts. Karma kurvanti means acts. How? Sangam tyaktva. So he gives up. Sangam is attachment. Tyaktva is gives up attachment. For what? What is the purpose? It says atma shuddhaye, for the purpose of purification. So that is the purpose of a yogi to act. Atma shuddhi. What happens with the purification? That realization comes. As we become more and more purified by our sadhana, that knowledge or that realization that we are not the body, we are the soul, that realization will become stronger. It will come for us. So that is the purpose here. So Jnanam Gyayam Parigyata Trividha Karma Chodana. So Krishna says these are also in 3 modes. And Karnam Karma Karteti. So what are the actions? The constituents of the action. So basically Jnanam Gyayam Parigyata are the motivating factors of the action, and the constituents of the action are Karnam Karma Karteti Trividha Karma Sangraha. So Karnam are the senses, any activity that we have to do. Karnam Karma Karteti. So karma is the activity itself. Karnam is the tool to do that activity. If the activity is speaking, I am speaking right now. So the tool that I'm using is the karna. Karna is the sense, and the sense that I'm using is the tongue. So actually tongue is not the doer, I am the doer. I means the soul is the doer, but I'm using my activity. So these are and karma sangraha. Karma sangraha is the aggregate of the activity. So all of this is in the 3 modes. And then Krishna finally again in the next verse 18.19, he says Jnanam karma cha karta cha tridhaiva guna bhedataha prochyate guna sankhyane yathavat shrinutanyapi. He says Jnanam karma cha karta cha. All these 3. Jnanam is knowledge, karma is the activity itself, and karta is the doer. These also are in the 3 modes. So he says, now hear about this from me. So these 2 verses are the seed verses from which the further discussion is growing. So Krishna, as I mentioned earlier, here in this 18th chapter, he is talking about the constituents of the action. So what are the different things that he's going to talk about? He says Jnanam. So what is the different kinds of knowledge? How the knowledge itself is in the 3 modes. Then karma, the activity is in the 3 modes. Then karta is the doer, how he is in the 3 modes. Then he goes beyond, actually these 3 things he mentions in 18.19. But then he goes beyond and then he talks about dhriti. Dhriti is more like the determination. It's very similar to our motivation. How dhriti itself is in the 3 modes. And then he talks about sukham. Sukham is basically happiness, because every activity that we do, the purpose of that activity is, we want to get some pleasure out of it. Even if we are sitting here today, we are discussing about Krishna or Bhagavad Gita. The idea is that we want to make Krishna happy, and by making Krishna happy, we will get some happiness out of it. So the real happiness is to basically try to satisfy the senses of Krishna, the transcendental senses of Krishna, and follow the order of the spiritual master. That will bring us real happiness. That is the purpose that we are discussing this, right? So happiness is also what Krishna is going to discuss in later in this 18th chapter. Now coming back to the knowledge in the three modes. So if you remember, first, so every time when Krishna is talking about different things in different modes, he first starts with the mode of goodness, how that particular thing is in the mode of goodness. Then he talks about the mode of passion, rajas, and then finally he talks about the mode of ignorance. So here in this 18.22, he is talking about how knowledge is in the mode of ignorance, the tamasic knowledge. Prabhupada writes about how the knowledge of the common man is tamasic, is talking more in terms of modern science. But to understand what is the difference between the three, let us first quickly discuss I know we discussed this last week, but just to remind and make a comparative analysis between the knowledge in the three modes, let's quickly talk about knowledge in the mode of goodness, then in the mode of passion, and then we'll come to mode of ignorance. So 18.20 is where Krishna talks about knowledge in the mode of goodness. So he says sarva bhuteshu yenekam bhavam avyayam ikshate avibhaktam vibhakteshu tad jnanam vidhi satvikam. Excuse me. This is the knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities. That is considered to be in the mode of goodness. So this is similar to what Krishna actually had said, not exactly similar, but little bit similar in 5.18 Vidya Vinay Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Suni Chaiva Swapakcha Panditaha Samadarshina. Pandita, like a real Pandita is not a Brahmin. Pandita is basically a wise person. A person who has real knowledge. He sees that one spiritual entity exists in every living entity. So something similar also here Krishna is saying in 18.20, Sarva Bhuteshu Yenekam Bhavam Avyam Ikshate Avibhaktam Vibhakteshu. One undivided, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand. One undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities. Basically, he sees that actually at the material level, there is so much diversity. Some people are rich, some people are poor, some people are, very beautiful, some people are not so beautiful. Some people are very clever, some people are very foolish. How is that? There's so much material diversity, but at the core, every person, every living entity is a spiritual entity. That is, so that unity in diversity, one who can see that unity in diversity, that person is in the mode of goodness. So Krishna also had said, Satvat Sanjayate Jnana. So the real knowledge is in the mode of goodness. And if you remember, I think in the 10th or 11th chapter, when Jnana comes, Prabhupada defines Jnana as the understanding the difference between matter and spirit. So at the material level, we can see that there is so much diversity at the material level. But at the spiritual level, we see that every living entity is a spiritual entity. Mamayivamsho jivaloke jiva bhuta sanatana. Every living entity is a part and parcel of Krishna, and Krishna is very spiritual. And every living entity is spiritual in that way. And every living entity is a part of parcel in Krishna. So that knowledge is in the mode of goodness. Then he talks about the knowledge in the mode of passion. Prataktvena tu yad jnanam nana bhavan prithak vidhan vaitti sarveshu bhuteshu tad jnanam vidhi rajasam. That knowledge by which one sees that in every different body there is a different type of living entity. You should understand to be in the mode of passion. So this is, Prabhupada had a discussion with one of the professors. I'm trying to remember the name of the professors. So the idea was that every person has a different kind of, not exactly soul. Modern science, I don't think he was talking more in terms of soul. But the idea was that the whole idea of personhood is the epiphenomena of, the brain. The explanation that was given was the brain is, every person has a different brain chemistry that produces a different kind of consciousness. and that way every person is different, and this uh, consciousness ends with the body, you know. So something like the chemicals produce consciousness. That was the idea. That is the idea that at least many of the modern atheistic scientists have. And Prabhupada had also faced these kind of arguments, and he had defeated those arguments also. But if we consider, you know, if you look at this verse again, that knowledge by which one sees that in every different body there is a different type of living entity, you should understand to be in the mode of passion. To a large extent, even Christianity have this idea. You know, their idea is that, you know, that the soul in the humans is different than the souls that are there in the body of animals. And actually they say that there are three different kinds of souls. The soul is in the mode of the soul that is there in the body of humans, the soul that is there in the body of animals, and the soul that is there in the body of plants. So they say that in the body of plant it is more in like a vegetative soul. That's, I think, one of the terms that I had read once. This was an article written by someone by the name of Thomas. He's a very famous Christian preacher. I'm missing his full name. But in fact, many of us would know this already, and I think we have discussed this in the past. Until about 200 years ago, Christianity had the idea that women do not have any soul. You know, that is like a very radical idea, that women do not have any soul at all. You know, so but at least now they have kind of agreed that no, women also have soul. But then the other problem with Christianity that comes is they don't clearly understand, you know, what is the difference between the body and the soul. You know, at a broad level, they have four different ideas about the difference between the body and the soul. I'm audible, right? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay, I was getting a
N-
message
now
that
they still don't have that. They have the idea that animals don't have soul. Like,
yeah. Actually, I was getting a message that says your internet connection is unstable. Okay, so good that you're able to hear me. So basically, about the we were talking about more in terms of the difference between the body and the soul is not very clearly understood in Christianity, and there are different kinds of schools of thought even within Christianity. Like we have in the Vedic culture, there are different schools of thought. Similarly, they have different schools of thought. So one of the ideas that they have is radical dualism, that soul and matter, the soul and body are completely different. This is something similar to the the Pancham Bhed that Madhvacharya had talked about. Then the second idea in Christianity is that there is no difference between the soul and the body. You know, it's completely same, something like Mayavad, not exactly, but something like Mayavad. Then the third idea is that there is a difference between the soul and the body, but it is inconceivable. We cannot conceive that difference, something like Achintya Bheda that we have. You know? And the fourth idea is that, you know, we don't know whether soul and body are different or the same, but both soul and body will be revived at the time of judgment. Revived in the sense they have the idea of resurrection, because Jesus was resurrected. Their idea is that there will be a second coming of Jesus, and at time there will be a judgment, and the soul and the body will be resurrected with that. So that is there. These are like the four different kinds of ideas they have. So it's very, very unclear. They can't understand what is the difference between the body and the soul. We see in the Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, Krishna very clearly differentiates. He gives the characteristics of the body, and then he gives the characteristics of the soul. That, you know, these are differences. We can clearly differentiate, you know, what is body and what is not body, what is soul, what is not soul. The other thing we understand about Christianity is that they accept soul without accepting reincarnation. Then that kinds of defeats the purpose, because their idea is that, you know, their idea of eternality of the soul is, you know, it is forward going, not backwards. We understand that in the Vedic culture, we understand that the soul has always existed, you know, and it's just that it has taken different kinds of bodies, and now this soul, that I am a soul, I have this particular kind of body. But their idea is that the soul is eternal, but it is only forward going, not backwards, in the sense that when a man and woman unite, they understand that a new soul is created, a new soul comes into into the world. And from that point on, that soul becomes eternal, because they don't accept the idea of reincarnation. And their idea is that after the soul has taken, come to the world, from that point on, if the soul accepts Jesus as the savior, it will go to the spiritual eternally. They don't understand that there may be a next birth. So it is either in eternal heaven or eternal condemnation to hell. That is their idea. So if you don't accept Jesus, then you are going to go to hell forever, for eternality. Eternally you will live in hell. So this idea about so this kind of knowledge, is in the mode of passion, where you see that every living entity has a different kind of soul. So one of the characteristic of the mode of passion is, it basically glues our vision to the externals, because in the mode of passion, the person wants to enjoy more and more. That is the whole idea. Even if we look at the Vedic culture, the people who are in the mode of passion, even if they are following the Vedic culture, then they do the karma kandi rituals, because they want to enjoy. So they will perform different kinds of karma kandi rituals, and the idea is that through those rituals they want to get some enjoyment. So the mode of passion, because when a person is in the mode of passion, the idea is enjoyment alone, and basically that glues the vision to externals. Because if you go to the crux of the things, if you go deep into the things, you will see that there is actually nothing to enjoy. Everything is made of every sense object is made of the 5 elements, earth, air, water, and fire, and ether. So even if we look at, even if a person is like an atheist, still they will understand that, okay, everything is made up of chemicals. So what is there to enjoy in this world? But what happens in the mode of passion is, because the vision is glued to the externals, they cannot understand the real tattva. Tattva is the actual essence of existence. That is not very clearly understood. So even if we talk about, say, religion, so what happens is, because in the mode of passion, everything is perceived differently. The person perceives that, everything is very different. Everything is at an external level. We see that even if we talk about different religions, at the essence, we understand the purpose of religion is to develop love for God. That is the essence of the purpose of every religion, right? But if we just look at the external, if, say, for example, if you look at the Hindus, when they have to offer respects to God, when they have to offer prayers to God, they will fold their hands. If we look at the Muslims, they will raise their hands to offer their respects to God. And for the Christians, if they have to offer respect, they will move their hands like this. But the idea is, it's the expression of, at an external level, it is an expression of how you are offering your respects. But at an internal level, it is like a kind of offering to God. We are, in one way, we are expressing our love for God, or our respect for God. So but just the external creates so much disturbances. Forget about different religions. Even within Christianity, if you look things a little bit more deeper, they have 2 broad sects. They have the Baptists, and then they have the Methodists. So the Baptists, they have the idea that, during baptism, if you don't soak your head in the river water, then you are actually not baptized, and then because of that, you are going to go to hell forever. That is the idea that they have. And the Methodists, their idea is that you have to sprinkle the water on the head, not dip your water in the river. And because you don't dip your water in the head, because you don't sprinkle water on your head, and that is why you're going to go to hell forever. So, just it is more of an external thing, but they have such radical ideas about it, that just because of some external activity, there will be such extreme results. So all this is in the mode of passion. You don't understand the essence of things. The essence is not how you accept certain thing. The essence is whether the condition of your heart. What is the condition? When Krishna comes, he will, at the end of our life, when Krishna comes, he will not see whether the das is there at the end of our name or not. He will look at the condition of our heart, what is there in our heart, and based on that he will decide whether we are fit to go back to Godhead or not. So now this is not to say that externals are completely unimportant. Externals are important, and externals are the means for purification, and externals actually they derive their potency through, because they are ordained in scriptures, or even if they may not be ordained in the scriptures, they are ordained in the teachings of the previous spiritual teachers, you know, in our case in the acharyas. So from that perspective, the externals are also important. So when Prabhupada had come to US, when Prabhupada had come to Western countries, he actually had taught. So at that time, the whole idea of vegetarian cooking was not there. You know, even if someone would understand that, you know, meat eating is not good, they don't had any conception of any vegetarian cuisine. You know, the idea of how can you actually, vegetables mean this raw vegetable, eat the vegetable. That was their idea. But when Prabhupada came, he just did not give the knowledge about you know, that you have to eat vegetarian diet. He actually helped practically. You know, he taught so many different varieties of servings that can be made through vegetables. In the Hare Krishna explosion, Haigriv Prabhu, he writes that, you know, I was amazed to see that Prabhupada's knowledge of vegetarian cuisine is as vast as his knowledge of verses, scriptural verses, you know. So Prabhupada actually had practically also helped in that way. So externals are, in our case, now what had happened once, I think we had discussed this. This was in the Vrindavan. There's this temple where they had dressed Krishna with a mobile phone in his hand and with jeans and t-shirt and with a goggle. So their idea was that, you know, Krishna is looking modern, and if we dress Krishna like this, modern people will get attracted to Krishna. So, and then they would say, what is there in the dress? You know, it is all just external. So why do you want to, you know, but it basically created a lot of furor, you know, a lot of, many people did not like it. Even this was not ISKCON related at all. This was a completely different temple. I've always missed the name of that temple. Anyway, that's not important. But they actually had dressed Krishna in modern looking dress. So now, is it that this is only external? No, it is external in one way, but it is dangerous to say that, because what are Krishna's likes and dislikes, they are mentioned in the scriptures, you know. So it's not that we can change the likes and dislikes of Krishna according to our likes and dislikes. So Krishna has his, you know, Krishna is a person, and as a person he has his own preferences, and his preferences are not just preferences, they are his supreme preferences. You know, he's a supreme person, and you know, his preferences are, at least for him, it is supreme preferences. So in the spiritual world there is a eternal spiritual culture, and that eternal spiritual culture manifest in this material world at different times. You know, now some people write that off as saying that it was some historical culture, why do you want to replicate that here? But actually it is not just a historical culture. Actually it is a spiritual culture which exists in the spiritual world. When I was in Pune once, it was long time back, at least more than 10 years back, I still remember Bhakti Vikas Maharaj had visited, and he was giving a class, and he saw that many of the initiated devotees also, they were not wearing proper devotional dressing. Their attire was more, you know, jeans, t-shirt, on those kind of attire. So he was not very happy about it. He said that you should wear proper dhoti, kurta and sari. He said, this, don't think that this is just Indian culture. He said this is the spiritual culture that exists in the spiritual world, and this is very true actually. So what we try to do here is that we try to replicate the culture that exists in the spiritual world as far as possible. We try to replicate that spiritual culture here in the material world. So, and the idea is that even though it may appear external, but that external is there to remind us of internals. You know, it basically reminds us that why am I dressing like this? Why am I wearing kurta and dhoti? Why am I putting this tilak? You know, it is for the pleasure of Krishna. So basically when we look at each other, when we see each other dressed in devotional attire, that is meant to remind us that all this that we are doing, that is basically to try to develop love for Krishna in our hearts. So the idea is that these externals take our vision from external to internal. So coming to this verse, today's verse 18.22, I'll read the translation one more time. Here Krishna had said, Yattu Krishna vadekasmin karye saktam ahetukam atat vartha vadalpam cha tat tamasam udaharitam. And that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as the all in all, without knowledge of the truth, and which is very meager, is said to be in the mode of darkness. So actually, here Krishna is talking more about modern science, not so much about modern science, but more about technology. The technology. So nowadays we see that there is this idea of specialization. So, and not just specialization, there is the idea of super specialization. So what exactly is specialization? Specialization is basically to know more and more about less and less. So when we say there is this specialist doctor, so out of the whole medical field, a doctor may specialize in a particular area. He may specialize in, say, orthopedics. Orthopedics is a study of the bones. So he might know a lot of things, but only about bones, nothing about, and there's so much else to know, but he doesn't know that. And super specialization means to know, more and more about actually nothing. Nothing in the sense, I was actually talking to one of my friends. He's my god brother, and he has done PhD. And I was asking him, what are the different subjects on which people do people do PhD. So he told me a lot of things, and one thing that caught my attention was, he said one of his friends did a PhD on motion of meson. Meson is like a subatomic particle, and not just his specialization was in motion of meson in hydrogen atom, when the hydrogen atom is raised to the temperature of 300 degrees Celsius. So he has done a PhD on that, and this meson is actually just like a hypothetical particle. No one can actually prove also that it actually exists or not. So what is the use of such knowledge? If you just do this PhD on this motion of meson only in the hydrogen atom, and that too when the hydrogen atom is raised to the temperature of 300 degrees Celsius. So it is like atatvartha vadalpam cha, very meager, alpam, very meager knowledge. And then basically what happens is, modern scientists, they specialize in certain things, and they said, this is my area, this is as if it is like their kingdom. They say, this is my kingdom, nobody can challenge me in this area. But what's the use of that knowledge when you don't understand everything in the proper context? Prabhupada translates intelligence as analyzing things in the proper context. So, and Krishna is also saying here, without knowledge of the truth, that knowledge, and that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as the all in all, without knowledge of the truth. Truth means to look at the big picture, how everything is connected, and which is very meager, is said to be in the mode of darkness. So the modern science, what is happening now is, we see that at least for last 50 to 70 years, there is not much development in the real science per se. What is developing is, there's a tremendous amount of development in technology, but from a scientific perspective, there is no scientific growth as such. What technology, what it does is, basically it tries to control matter. It tries to manipulate matter. So that is all they are trying to do. The knowledge itself is not in the scientific domain. The knowledge is not growing. There are books that are written by scientists, some physicists. The name of the book is The Dead End of Physics. If you read those books, very graphically, they have mentioned that how the real hunt for scientific knowledge is not there right now. What is growing right now, there's a tremendous amount of development that is happening in technology. And technology is basically the servant of the people who want to make sense enjoyment more and more accessible and more pleasurable. So all that is, that basically is technology right now. So all technology is doing is, it is making sense gratification easily accessible and more pleasurable for us. So we have these cell phones, and the cell phones are becoming more and more advanced. You can do a lot of things on cell phones. You have these TVs at your home, all, you can do a lot of things on the TV. All this is because of technology. But is it really knowledge? Is it really scientific knowledge? No. It is all advancement in the technology. So with that, I take a pause here and see if there are any comments or any questions, corrections about what I said today.
What's the difference between scientific knowledge and technology? I mean,
No, technology is, I'm sorry, go ahead,
I
Prabhuji.
can understand it's not knowledge that's gonna, not anything spiritual or knowledge about who we are. So it's not gonna help us in any way, but isn't that what all the science is? What does science
Right.
do besides
So
that?
technology is definitely a branch of science, but what technology does is basically it is like try to manipulate matter more and more. Science is more defined as understanding the reality of things. What is the reality of things? What is the, as Prabhupada says, Prabhupada has asked one of the questions that, is there in your university, is there a department that studies the soul? you know so they said no. Then that means, Prabhupada said, that means you have no knowledge. So actually, uh, the 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 quest for knowledge, as the knowledge that exists today is more basically in terms of scientism. Scientism is a terminology that is used for saying that science is the only branch of knowledge, and whatever science cannot explain is not actually knowledge. So there's so many things that science cannot explain. Science cannot explain consciousness. Science cannot explain experiences. Science cannot tell us whether a person is beautiful or not. It is something for us to experience. So science cannot explain experiences. Science cannot even explain the sensory perceptions. That is something that a person who has senses, he has to understand that. Science cannot tell us whether a particular, we have these big machines to make cakes. The machine cannot tell us that whether this cake is tasty or not. We have to actually taste it to see whether it is tasty or not. So what is being done today is more in terms of manipulating matter, and try to develop things out of that manipulation. But the knowledge about the real, uh, um the nature of the world, that is not increasing. Prabhu, did I
So
answer?
go ahead.
I was just asking Pyari Prabhu, did I answer your question, Prabhuji?
Yes, yes.
So
Yes,
in the
Mataji.
in the translation, it says like, if you don't know the truth, knowing anything else is really darkness.
Exactly. See, one thing is that, so there are three things that are there. The one thing is that you accept that I don't know, and then if you accept that, okay, I don't know, then at least there will be that that I don't know, and then I am ignorant, and I should not try to, at least there will be a quest that, okay, let me try to dispel my ignorance. But if you don't know and you think that then that is a problem, right? Because you know something that is not true, that is not the truth. So that kind of knowledge is considered to be in the mode of ignorance, where you think that I know everything, but what you know is just it might be true, but it is just one small part, very meager knowledge about the actual truth. It's not the whole truth, it's not the complete truth. So, and the other, there's a next level, basically, that you say that anything that that science cannot explain is not knowledge. That is one part. And then you say that actually that is, whatever science cannot explain is not true. But science has its own limitations. Science basically, if you see, operates uh, on a principle that is called as fundamental naturalism. Fundamental naturalism means it tries to explain the material causes for material phenomena. That is the scope of science basically. And when we say there are certain things that are not physical, so one of the example for this is intelligence itself. We know that intelligence is not physical, but we perceive intelligence. When two persons are talking, you can actually understand which of the person is actually intelligent. If a person is intelligent or not, you can actually perceive that. So science only deal with physical things. It to a certain extent it deals with subtle matter, but that's about it. It basically, the whole scope of science is to understand matter. That's it. It doesn't deal with anything spiritual.
But still,
Srila Prabhupada says the science of the soul.
Right. Spiritual science is a different body of knowledge, which material science does not exist. Does not accept, not exist. The spiritual science is a body of knowledge which material science does not accept, and that basically is scientism. Scientism is basically anything that you cannot explain through science. That is not knowledge.
but
Mataji, can I go ahead?
I just wanted to do a follow-up. But anything that you're learning might be a means to an end also.
I didn't understand it, Mataji.
So you might be studying something. It says that anything that does not lead to the truth is darkness, but it might be a means to an end to like get a job or something. And through that, you might be actually serving Krishna with whatever you're earning.
Yeah, but to consider that as all in all, that is in the mode of ignorance. If you just consider that, okay, this is everything for me, So modern people, their idea is, so modern people talk about the balance between work life and professional life, So now if you consider it from a spiritual perspective, both are material. Work life is also material and family life is also material. There is nothing spiritual about it. But nowadays, even that balance is not there. People think that, I have to be like a super achiever in my work field, and they work like 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours for that. And even that balance at a material level is not there. If you consider, success does not mean that you become like a superhero in one area of your life, and then you become like a miserable failure in everything else.
Even if you win a Nobel Prize, it's meaningless, right? Yeah.
Right. So if you think that, that is everything for me and I will only focus on this and I will not consider anything else, that will become a problem then. So that kind of knowledge is in the mode of ignorance.
Okay. Sorry, Sundar Gopinath Prabhu.
No, Mataji, no problem. Ganpati Govind Prabhu, thank you very much for explaining such a difficult topic in a very nice way. My question is, Lord Krishna always encouraged to do hard work. For example, Arjuna was told by Krishna to go and do tapasya and get all the weapons. So now in modern days, if we want to put it in a scientific way, or many of our work life, so let's say like we can also do a hard work, but only thing is we should not get attached to the result, or as you mentioned that we should not think this is everything. So that part I understood, but how to understand this this part where Lord Krishna says many times he has instructed Arjuna to do a hard work and earn. These are in Mahabharata time, if we see, then getting weapons and all those things are material. How to how in Arjuna's case that was spiritual, and how in our modern days, whatever work we do or whatever achievements, many scientists, to get to that position, they have done a lot of hard work. So I mean, how to spiritualize basically.
Okay, so why Krishna asks Arjuna to do hard work to get weapons and all? So one thing is that Arjuna is a Kshatriya, and then there is Krishna could foresee that there is a war that is going to happen, and then Arjuna is like one of the greatest warrior at that time, and for him to have those weapons would be good. Now, how do we understand that? For us, in the material world, the hard work that we do, how is it different? So if you look at the whole context of Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse that Krishna actually speaks. I don't remember the exact verse. Krishna says that Arjuna, you are trying to run away from your duty, but ultimately because of your nature, you will come back and you will fight this war, anyway. He says that, this artificial, if you artificially try to repress your original nature, it's not going to last for long. Ultimately you'll have to come here and fight only. So what is the difference? One may ask that if Krishna knew that, Arjuna is going to fight anyway, then what's the point in speaking the whole Bhagavad Gita? So the whole Bhagavad Gita Krishna had spoken is, not just that Arjuna should fight the war. The whole Bhagavad Gita that was spoken was, the real purpose was that in what consciousness should he fight the war? What should be his consciousness during while fighting the war? So that is actually one of the purposes of Krishna speaking the whole Bhagavad Gita. So he says that, okay, the activity is the same. Arjuna is also fighting the war. Duryodhana is also fighting the war. Now, how could you say that, Arjuna is is doing dharma and Duryodhana is doing adharma? So one of the things is that what is the consciousness? What is the motivation by which you are fighting the war? So Arjuna actually, if you see towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Krishna, I'll do your will. Karishye vachanam tava. Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. So the purpose was, Arjuna understood that Krishna, my ultimate purpose is to please Krishna. And ultimately, I am not the body, I am the soul. And, I am fighting this not for any material purpose. I am fighting this war for a spiritual purpose. I want to actually please Krishna. So that was the motivation. If we have that motivation, if we offer our work to Krishna, in whatever work we are doing, obviously it should not be against the injunction of the scriptures. We should not be saying that, I should be like a butcher and then offer my work to Krishna. That's not how it's going to work. But as long as the scope of our work is within the scope of the dharmic activities, within the injunctions of the scriptures, and if we are able to offer that work to Krishna, then we could say that, even if we are doing hard work, that work becomes spiritualized, because we have not offering not just the results of our work, but offering the work itself to Krishna. That is what Krishna will also say to later towards, I think in the 55th or one of the verses, Krishna will say that Swakarmanatam abhyarcha siddhim vindati manava. Through your work worship, siddhim vindati. And if you can offer your work to me like this, then you will attain siddhi. Siddhi is perfection. Did I answer your question, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, my question is how could we understand the duality of the material science knowledge? I mean, although we know it has limitation of the material science, how could we, if we are in the scientific area to do some work, how could we make a balance to make us always learn the scientific knowledge in the mode of goodness?
Okay, so your question is, how do we understand the limitations of the scientific knowledge, and how can we convert that knowledge into mode of goodness?
Yeah, my question is, how do we understand the duality of the material science, since it has a limitation, but it still has some kind of advantage, and how could we understand it?
Okay.
Yeah, the duality better.
So basically, science is a body of knowledge, and it is knowledge that is available. Now, how do you use that knowledge? That is up to you. So if we say that, all the technology is mundane, all the technology is in the mode of ignorance, but actually we are using technology right now to even discuss this. So I'm using my laptop and I'm using my headphones and, I'm using internet, and all of these are actually products of technology. So, but if you put that knowledge to a good use, if you put that knowledge to a constructive use, then that can be in the mode of goodness. But if you use that knowledge for mundane purposes, and if you use that knowledge to further agitate your senses, further become servants of your senses, then the same knowledge will be acting in the mode of ignorance. One of the lectures that I had attended, so Gyanam Gyayam Parigyata, this was basically when this was discussed. So Gyayam means the object of knowledge. So I think Suhotra Swami was giving this lecture. So he was explaining Gyayam, the object of knowledge, is the same, and different people can perceive that object of knowledge in different ways. So he gave an example of like a young woman, and a young woman is perceived by 4 different people. So one is the young woman is perceived by a young man. That same woman is perceived by a soul, by a sage, and the same woman, actually 3 different people he had used. And then he said the same woman is perceived by a lion. So he said that the object of the knowledge is the same, the Gyayam is same object of knowledge, but people are perceiving that same object of knowledge in 3 different ways. The young man is perceiving that woman as an object of enjoyment. The sage is he understands that this is an object of illusion, and for lion it is like a lunchbox. I want to eat it. So although the knowledge of the Gyayam is the same, but it depends on the consciousness of the person who is observing. So ultimately, even the technological advancement, it can be put to good use or it could be put to bad use. So what happens is, if you really understand the 3 modes, the 3 modes actually govern the interaction between consciousness and matter. How your consciousness is interacting with matter, that is actually governed in the 3 mode by the 3 modes. So that exactly is the definition of the 3 modes. So even though the matter is dead, the matter is, the matter by itself is not living, but the same matter is perceived differently in 3 different modes. So did I answer your question?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
All right. I think we're past 8. Any final comments before we wrap up?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I just would like to share, no questions.
Go ahead. Prabhu.
So it is about the religion. So yesterday I was hearing Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, he gave example of gold. So the way he said, gold is gold, whether if that gold is with Hindu, we don't call it as a Hindu gold. When the same gold is with the Muslim, we don't call it as a Muslim gold, and same with the Christian gold. Similarly, dharma is just one dharma, that is Bhagavad Dharma. And again, as he usually used that word rascals, right? So he used that word saying rascals has actually, made those religion, and those are man-made religion, but the only dharma is one dharma, which is Bhagavad Dharma. So that is something I wanted to share.
Very nice, Prabhuji. Okay, all right. I think we can end it here. Thank you everyone. Thank you for joining. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.